Welcome everyone to the inaugural episode of Gaming in Retrospect, or GiR for short. A review series aimed at giving you a look at games and related media as it happened. A momentous day? Maybe sometime else down the line. But enough about me and the show itself. Here's Sonic 1, coming right at ya! But first, a brief history on Sega. Now, the beginning of Sega traces back to the early days of coin-operated games. We're talking back when stuff like pinball machines and slot machines were starting to pick up steam sometime between the 30s and 50s. The story often told begins when a company in Hawaii known as Standard Games began distributing coin-op games to military bases during World War II America as a way for men on the job to pass the time. After the war, the company was renamed Service Games, since in a way it kinda did serve during the war, and found new places to send their machines over now that the US had occupied parts of Japan to keep them in check. Here, the company would begin to manufacture and distribute games from Tokyo, Japan, officially call themselves Sega, and start to build their image as a video game company. For a little while, they made electromechanical arcade games without video screens. Like Periscope in 1966, which was one of the first coin-op games that cost $0.25 to play. Today that's equal to about $2, so I guess it was a little pricey, but nonetheless it was still a worldwide hit. A few years later, they would also publish and develop a game called Jet Rocket, which was one of the earliest, if not the earliest, first-person shooter game, the first ever open-world sandbox game, the first ever action-adventure game, and even the first ever flight simulator game, all wrapped into one. Allegedly. Their first actual arcade video game would be Pongtron in 1973, which... yeah, it's a Pong clone, but you gotta consider that Atari probably wasn't able to get their game out to Japan first before Sega did. And it managed to be another hit for the company, and Sega would thus fall down the arcade game rabbit hole, innovating with game after game for the next few decades and really having one of the best success stories during that early video game boom era. But then the early 80s struck, and what happened in the early 80s? Yup, it's that damn video game crash of 1983 again, here to mess things up. Now, we covered part of Nintendo's side of that in our last video, so this time we can actually look at what happened to Sega. Now, much like how it was for Nintendo, the video game crash mostly affected the North American market. So even though arcade profit sales were low worldwide, the negative stigma of your typical console in the early 80s didn't necessarily spread everywhere. That's why a company like Sega would feel safe in developing their home console for the Japanese market, much like how Nintendo did initially.
Sega video game SG-1000 Sega!
And actually, both consoles would end up being released on the same day in Japan. Nintendo with the Family Computer, or Famicom, and Sega with the SG-1000. Sounds like a Terminator. Now, you can already tell just from looking at these that the SG-1000 wasn't anywhere near the Famicom's league. I know graphics aren't everything, but the games on this thing look like the forgotten step between the Atari 2600 and the NES. And the music, man. Once you've heard one, you've heard them all. God, it's awful! Turn it off! But even if all that weren't the case, the main thing that really bit this console where it hurt was the lack of third-party support. Sega made most of the games on it, and by the end of its run, there weren't really that many to fall back on. Not to mention, since the market was so new anyways, they barely had any idea on what they were doing. None of the games at launch could really compete with Donkey Kong on Famicom, and Nintendo just took the video game market for themselves while Sega just sat there with a duck in their hands. And that's where the Sega Master System came to play. Originally called the Sega Mark III, this thing was made to be a redesign from the last console we just talked about. However, most importantly, it would enhance the graphics from its predecessor, and Sega made sure that this thing looked better than the Famicom so it could at least have something over its competition. And did it work? No, but kinda yeah. Sega released this console in 1985 in Japan with poor launch reception. This thing did not do well in Japan. Dead. But they did redesign it for Western audiences the following year where it did awful, but mainly only in the US. Nintendo would rule North America and Japan's gaming markets with an iron fist for the remainder of the 80s, no bones about that. But Sega would finally find some admirers for their console in Europe and Brazil of all places. Nintendo didn't really do much to market their console in Europe, so Sega would actually make a considerable dent in the gaming industry there, but for Brazil it's a bit of a weird case. Apparently the NES didn't even get there up until 1993, so the Master System remained wildly successful over there, even up until today. They still manufacture Master Systems over there, so I guess technically there is a Sega console that's still currently ongoing today. But even though it sounds like I'm talking about this like it's some sort of ridiculous thing, the Master System was really where Sega began having its first few gems like Alex Kidd, Ys, Shinobi, Phantasy Star, with Alex Kidd often being considered Sega's first true video game mascot. Can't say the same for the box arts though. They're a little weird and bland with the white grid and interesting art. You know, at least Nintendo moved on from its goth phase. Around this time though, because the graphics looked better than the NES's, Sega would begin to advertise this idea that the games were in similar quality to arcade titles at the time, which is a bit of a reach. Here's Sega's Space Harrier, one of the first arcade games to use 16-bit graphics back in 1985. Now granted, a lot of technology goes into an arcade machine, especially if it were able to run in 60 FPS with God knows what the hell is happening on the screen, but the Sega Master System port of it looks like it runs 4 times as slow, and don't even ask me what in God's name is happening over here. I mean, I guess it's better looking than your typical Nintendo game. Not by much though. Also, have you seen Afterburner on this thing? I feel like I'm simulating what it's like to have a stroke. But yeah, that's the Master System for you. Sega's development team couldn't really match up to Nintendo's, and third-party support was locked behind Ninty's bars, which really didn't allow for much potential in the gameplay department. There was one thing that Sega definitely had over Nintendo at the time. A pretty good and varied arcade lineup during the 80s. Why did this matter? Well, when the NES took off, Nintendo pretty much put all their focus on their console, while Sega continued making arcade games. It's kinda like them sticking to their roots, you know? The whole coin-op slot machine thing. Now let's just say that by the late 80s, arcade games would evolve a lot from your Pac-Mans and Donkey Kongs. Can't really say if they're all good, but visually, I'd pay a quarter or two to play some of these just out of intrigue. And that right there would be the idea behind Sega's next console. The Sega Mega Drive, or in North America the Sega Genesis, actually started development pretty soon after the Master System's launch. You know, once the thing was already failing pretty much from the get-go. And you know how I said graphics weren't everything when talking about the SG-1000? Well, at the time, Sega would beg to differ. The main objective of this new console was to bring the arcade experience home, something the Master System barely accomplished. Not only to have a huge step up over Nintendo, but to really cover their bases up against the likes of the NEC PC engine, or as it would become known in North America, the TurboGrafx 16. This is like the second video in a row that I'm mentioning this thing. Just know that it was the first home console to feature 16-bit graphics, and really not a bad looking one either. It had third-party support and worked with companies like Capcom, Namco, Konami, and even Sega themselves. This thing even managed to be #1 in Japan at one point. So let's just say that Sega had quite the hill to climb, even before they get a chance to show off their own console. In terms of development, they would combine the designs from some of their 16-bit arcade boards and the original Master System hardware until the product met their standards until its release in late 1988. And did it work? Initially, no. Again, in terms of 16-bit graphics, the PC Engine, or TurboGrafx 16, was on top in Japan due to being first. But also, Super Mario Bros. 3 came out 6 days before the Mega Drive hit the Japanese market. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna hit you with a spoiler right now. The Mega Drive would do horrible in Japan for its entire lifespan. Well, not horrible, but it was never a contender, not even for the PC Engine. Whatever Nintendo did during the 80s to early 90s apparently had people hooked the entire time and shut down any opening for Sega of Japan to make their console a success. But seemingly every other market would be different, however, especially the American market. Much like the Master System, the thing would be rebranded and renamed. This time would be called the Genesis and would be made to look better than the NES in every way possible. Bundle it in with a port of Sega's popular Altered Beast arcade game, and an endorsement from Donald Trump, yes really, and now you have a console that's ready for launch.
Are you sure about that?
Actually, yeah. I mean, of course, the Master System didn't sell well, so there probably weren't too many people hopeful at launch, but it quickly outshone the TurboGrafx 16 and looked like it was starting to have a good future ahead of it. The next prerogative was to take down Nintendo, so they would keep on pushing the whole arcade experience thing and make some games that featured big names on the title, with probably the most famous of these being Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. another port of a Sega arcade game. And it worked. Finally! Genesis did what Nintendo couldn't! Wow, that sounds awful. But hark! Nintendo was readying up their successor to the NES! The Super Famicom, as we know, would do extremely well in Japan and never really give Sega a chance upon its release in late 1990. But in the States it was very different. The Super NES wouldn't arrive until August of 1991, and Sega anticipated this very well. Not only would Sega lower their price to be $50 cheaper than the SNES right before its launch, but they would unexpectedly bear one of the biggest video game franchises in the world by complete blind luck. Or maybe it was all planned. In Japan, the Mega Drive wasn't doing so well. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but damn it, it's true! And in 1990, Sega wanted a true mascot for their new console, unlike anything the competition had at the time. With that, they most likely meant that Alex Kidd looked too similar to Mario. Personally, I don't see it though. But a new initiative was taken by people working under Sega to sketch up some new ideas for a new mascot to lead a new generation of gaming. A whole lot of new, I know. We need to be ahead of the curve, man. So as a result, there were a lot of pitched concepts, such as this rabbit, a warrior, this cool chicken, Mario Simpson, and this strange but adorable mustached man in pajamas. Oh, where would the world be if this got greenlit? But what new appeal was this new mascot going to bring to the table? Well, as the design was being narrowed down, Sega approached Yuji Naka, who helped develop the first two Phantasy Star games, to do something with their next potential mascot. Long story short, Naka always wanted to make a game with a fast-moving character, and thought the basis for this next game should be based on the player's skill, awarding them with being able to complete a stage as fast as possible. After talks of how the game should play, the basic design of this character was coming to fruition. It should be able to become a ball, to ricochet itself to defeat enemies with ease, whether it be on the ground or in the air. You know, without losing much momentum. Maybe like an animal that can curl up, like an armadillo. Or, what about a hedgehog? In the end, a character with a series of drawings called Mr. Needlemouse was chosen. Mostly because his spines look like it'd make a lot of sense in using to defeat enemies with, and because they kinda act as a bit of a blur effect, as if to say the character is constantly in motion. So yeah, now we have the species, but how can we evolve it to stand out and make an impression? Well, Sega most importantly than anything wanted to make this mascot succeed more in the West rather than Japan, because they thought it'd make a bigger impact if it could do so. With that, the design of the hedgehog would morph, taking inspiration from American classics like Felix the Cat and Mickey Mouse. They would base his color off of the company's blue logo, while his shoes were based off of Michael Jackson's boots, with the red and white colors coming from Santa Claus. As for his personality, it would be based off the get-it-done can-do attitude of a young Bill Clinton, since Naoto Oshima found him to be inspiring in the sense of wanting stuff to be done right away. Kinda like a level in the game, for example. And that there, my friends, was pretty much when Sonic got his name. Now, in terms of a story and background for the game, there were a couple of ideas being thrown around, like Sonic being in a band and having a human girlfriend. And these would be played around with up until the game's release, since the development team were so much more focused on what kind of world Sonic would run in. One asset that would constantly keep reappearing, however, was the mustache man in pajamas. He was so frequently supported and brought up that ultimately it was decided that he should be the main antagonist. And now we have ourselves a game! We'll talk more about development, of course if we have to, as we go through the game together. So finally, here's Sonic the Hedgehog, the game! Kickoff! But wait, not yet! It turns out this wasn't even the first game Sonic appeared in! Released in January of 1991, 5 months before release, Radmobile had Sonic's first ever appearance in video gaming encapsulated, taking the form of an air freshener. Boy, I hope that doesn't give anyone any ideas. But wait again! Sonic the Hedgehog wasn't even Sonic's second appearance in a video game. He actually appeared in an Amiga game called The Adventures of Quick and Soba as an enemy. His image was actually stolen along with Mario's, where they decapitated the latter and stuck him on a spring! But what else can I say? That's Sonic. An illegal Sonic, but a blue hedgehog with white gloves and red and white shoes nonetheless. They most likely stole the design from pre-release images and such. So now finally, let's get to the main game. Quick availability check. At launch, the game cost around $55, which today would be the equivalent of just over $100 given inflation. And you know, that's not too bad, considering other Genesis games went upwards to around $70. Not to mention the fact that the game would eventually be regularly packed in with the Genesis in bundles with comfier prices as the years went on. In terms of ports and re-releases, the game would be put in arcade machines in 1993, sold through several compilation packs, and put on pretty much every mobile device and modern-day video game console, all in its original state. The most infamous of these ports, however, is Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis for Game Boy Advance. Yeah, nice name. I got this game for my 10th birthday and... well, I digress. I guess we can't really understand why that failed if we don't look at the original. One final point though, this game is technically free to play today through Sega's Sega Forever service. Yeah, you can now legally play Sonic 1 along with many other SG-1000, Master System, and Genesis games completely free of charge, with ad support, and touch controls. Yeah, I'll take it, I guess. And now, the first thing we see when we turn on the game is the classic Sega logo, followed by the chorus. According to Yuji Naka, due to time constraints, stuff like Sonic breakdancing in a sound test was left out, leaving a lot of excess space. But in its place, we got this high-quality sound that apparently took up like an eighth of overall space in the cartridge. And really, talk about recognizability. It's right off the bat. Yeah, Sega means business. Then of course we get Sonic popping up on the title screen, ready to make an impression on... some people. Really, this title screen is just here to show, hey, you've never seen anything like this game before. I'm serious. Nothing. You get a real nice show of color here too. Usually the Genesis couldn't really match up to the Super Nintendo on color, but this just looks so bright and welcoming. Blue, green, and brown, you know, very lively, very earthly. After pressing start, we get hit with flying words as the first stage promptly loads and we see our first shot of gameplay. Here's Green Hill Zone, probably one of the most iconic video game levels of all time, for both good and bad reasons, depending on your point of view. We get to see an extension of the colorful atmosphere from the intro screen, with stuff like flowers and palm trees being added to bring life to Sonic's world. It's very pretty. It's also the debut of the checkerboard ground design, which is so synonymous with Sonic. It's supposed to kind of give you the mental image of a checkered flag, you know, from racing. And immediately you can already tell that I've already played this game a million times, as I just start jumping around collecting some rings. Huh? What's that? Oh, yes, the ring! Not that one. Probably the most broken item in video game history, to a degree. As long as you have at least one, you can survive most casualties. From a gameplay standpoint, it makes a lot of sense since the main gimmick of the game is that you're running at amazing speeds and at times you'll be stalked by obstacles that'll try to hurt you. But it doesn't make sense from a logical standpoint. Not that logic should really be applied here, but the lack of rings, with some other exceptions, is the only thing that keeps Sonic invincible. He could be shot a million times, have one ring, and never die. It's amazing. Also, collecting 100 of these gives you a life. Like other game. But one way to get a bunch of rings, among many other ways, is by breaking open these monitors. Here's the first one right here, and... guys, South Island, the place where this entire game takes place, has been infested by these things called badniks.
And he needs your help.
This level introduces enemies such as motobugs, buzz bombers, choppers, crab meats, and neutrons. Every time you defeat one of them, an animal friend pops out. This one looks like a human baby. Both different types of animal friends and different types of badniks appear in certain zones. Yeah, that's what we call this whole big place, a zone. And sometimes they'll reappear again in a later world. Like for example, the baby doesn't pop up in Green Hill Zone, but you can find it in Marble Zone, the next world. Not sure of the logic behind that, but it's documented so someone cares. Also a big Sonic staple are the springs, which launch at a particular direction depending on the way it's facing. And I think that might be it for the basics. Checkpoints are pretty self-explanatory. You can get invincibility and an extra hit from the monitors, along with lives and the ability to run faster for a short amount of time. So I think we're good? Alright, let's get to the good stuff. Green Hill Zone as the first world is made to introduce the concept of slopes and hills to you, along with the occasional loop in the middle that requires you to run at it with a good amount of speed. After the introduction to items and enemies, this place really encourages you to test out running fast. But running itself isn't Sonic's only main way of achieving speed. Using the well thought out physics of this game, curling into a ball and rolling down slopes is really the way to achieve the fastest speed possible. Sometimes it can almost even outrun the camera. It's like you're exiting the boundaries of the game. The funny part is that the camera not catching up with Sonic probably wasn't intentional. I assume it was just slowed down so the level could load itself with no regard for Sonic, who might be warping to another universe as we speak. Actually, speaking about warping to another universe, once we reach the end, we actually jump into a giant ring! Get over 50 rings in any level for signposts, except the ones past the 5th world, and you have a chance to strike it big with the... special stage? Look man, I know we're playing this up like it's supposed to be dreamlike, you know? an out-of-this-world experience, but this just gives me like an actual form of anxiety. Allow me to break it down. I want you to follow close, alright? Alright, listen to me. Listen to me good, alright? This whole stage, it's like rotating in space, right? And you have to navigate your way around the maze without getting too disoriented and accidentally exiting by touching the exit spheres. It sounds easy, right? Sounds pretty freaking easy! But wait! There's gravity here! Except it only affects you! And sometimes you accidentally speed up or slow down how fast the whole thing rotates, and sometimes you switch it to go the reverse direction, and then there's bumpers that throw you around, and...
You're killing me, man!
Alright. Once you're able to muster all that, you're eventually awarded the main prize of the special stage, which is the Chaos Emerald. What does it do? Nothing! Well, actually, I'll elaborate more on it later, but just in general, it doesn't have any practical use while you're playing the game. It's a bragging rights trophy as far as I'm concerned. Oh, and insert minor note here that you can get continues from collecting 50 rings on special stages. It's not all that hard to do if you can manage to get the Chaos Emerald, though. Green Hill Zone Act 2! Act 2? Yeah, I never really brought that up. Every zone or world in this game is separated by acts, except for the final zone, which is actually called the final zone. Alright. Level's pretty similar to the last one, but it's good in showing off how most levels in this game reward you for exploring alternate paths, as there's some goodies right over here. Alright, let's roll to break down this wall here, and... oh! Huh. Well, ain't you the level that keeps on giving. Here's the end right over here, and boom! Special Stage 2! Thank you, game, for making my editing job easier. This special stage is naturally a little harder than the first one. The main thing that's introduced here is the use of split paths, and unless you've played this game and tried to get all the Chaos Emeralds before, you'll never understand the horrors experienced from going the wrong way. This path right here, if you go anywhere within its vicinity, and the stage just so happens to be against your favor at just the right moment, you could scream all you want, but you're never getting out! I guess I should point out that you only have like 10 chances to get 6 Chaos Emeralds. 2 for every zone, except past the 5th one. And if I didn't make it clear from my earlier explanation, if you're playing these for the first time, I guarantee you will fail. Something about having done these stages so much as a kid traumatizes you into somehow choosing the right paths, even though you most likely don't remember any of them. And that's probably the only way I've been able to finish most of these. Keep in mind, both the normal stages and special stages become progressively harder as the game goes on. So if you can't beat some of the special stages as early as possible, good luck not losing your rings in the harder levels and somehow avoiding the risk of a panic attack once you're in 16-bit hell. I pray that you never experience what it's like not to get the final emerald on your last chance. Anyways, you break open the barrier again, here's your prize, and here's the last segment for Green Hill Zone, Act 3. Once again, no need to tread on the same ground. We go through a similar looking level, and instead of a signpost at the end with someone's face on it, someone actually appears! It's Dr. Ivo Robotnik, or Dr. Eggman in Japan. Yes, it's the mustached man in pajamas, repackaged as a villain! He's riding his signature Eggmobile, yes, that's what it's actually called, and he's pretty easy to beat. God, I don't know why my voice went up that high. Oh, by the way, a little secret. You can get invincibility in this tree right before the boss fight. As his only attack, the Doctor swings around a wrecking ball with the same checkered pattern as the ground. Fun fact, in an older build of the game, this wrecking ball was actually something Sonic was supposed to jump on and maybe ride on for a little bit. Pretty cool tidbit of research. Anyways, bop Robotnik shift enough times and you'll win the battle. But certainly not the war. And as your reward, you get to release your animal buddies into the wild after pressing the switch on a capsule. Now, Marble Zone. Ah, this place is kind of a downer. I mean, even the music, man, what is this, Altered Beast? It's not really a good mood for Sonic as a fast action-based platformer. Looking at beta footage for this level is probably the most interesting thing about it. There used to be UFOs flying through the air and some falling tiles that you could actually stand on. These were in no shape or way used in the final version of this stage, and that kinda sucks because it would actually make this level stand out a bit more. No. Instead we got lava and these giant green tube pressing thingies. Also, we've got 2 new enemies, the Caterkiller and the Bat Brain. Bat brains are nothing, just jump at them. They're gone. Caterkillars are the absolute worst though. If you don't get them by the head, like Thanos, they can break apart and can get a cheap shot at you. You might as well never interact with them. Anyways, these next 3 levels pretty much work the same way as you just start out on the surface, go down to a cave or ruins area with a bunch of traps, and really you do a bunch more waiting than strategically timing your jumps while running. Unless, of course, you abuse the hell out of damage boosting. That'll get you past anything. There's one segment of interest here though that shows up and never pops up ever again. During Act 2 of Marble Zone, there's this lava chase sequence, except it doesn't do a very good job of chasing you. It kind of stays there until you're far away from it, which is cool I guess since it won't get a cheap hit on you, but it's not even that fast, so the whole thing feels like it's an afterthought even though it's one of the more unique parts of this game. Anyways, neither of these 2 levels seem too tough in getting to the special stages, which also weren't too hard either. Well, the 4th one wasn't too hard. The 3rd special stage is the kind that I hate the most, where the whole place is just a big open area and you're supposed to somehow bump and jump your way towards the middle, and it's so nerve-wracking because you don't know if a second later you're just going to accidentally exit the whole thing. The 4th special stage is another diverging path kind of thing, except this time at least they have the decency to show an arrow of rings that point to the right way to go. Once we get to the end of the special stage here, we officially have 2/3 of all the Chaos Emeralds in our possession. Not bad. The boss of Marble Zone once again features Robotnik riding his Eggmobile, and probably what's an easier fight than the last time. Just don't let him breathe and he's done. Spring Yard Zone! This place combines aspects from both Green Hill Zone and Marble Zone, where sometimes you gotta wait, and other times you're allowed to go fast like you'd normally expect. Basically it's like an amusement park or pinball-like zone. Very appropriate for this sort of game, I gotta say. Originally this stage was called Sparkling Zone and looked a lot more like a casino with stars and signs everywhere. Fun fact, this was actually the first zone to be created and finished. I guess they're really sure they wanted this. And you know what? I can't blame them. When you think about the bare bones concept of a fast moving ball speeding all over the place, it makes sense for there to be a level with a bunch of ramps and slopes, along with springs and bumpers all over the place. And what can I say? Growing up, this place was always my favorite. Enemy check. In this place, we have spikes and the elusive rollers, which I call fake Sonics. Sometimes when people go really fast and see these enemies in particular, they're always like, what the hell? Is that like a fake Sonic? Yeah, that's where that came from. I think this stage, however, is most notorious for its enemy placement, which leaves much to be desired. This concept with the spiked balls and a half pipe is cool, but some of the badniks are way too annoying due to you being vulnerable after you bounce up from a spring. Who the hell would expect a random enemy to just stalk the top of this wall like he's edgeguarding against someone in Smash? This one badnik got me so good that I died, and despite not getting hit by him the next time around, I was not able to get enough rings to reach a special stage in Act 1. Come on! Some of these bumper segments can get real annoying too, like trying to escape this pit by hitting the bumpers in just the right way so you can reach the platform above. Not really much of an obstacle though, it's kind of a time waster. One really cool part from Spring Yard Zone though happens in Act 3 where you fall so fast the game can't catch up and the whole thing's like a giant half pipe. It's cool and it leads to a secret. That's the thing that really makes this game feel fresh too. Of course there's diverging paths, but straight up fake walls makes a guy feel pretty damn special when he finds them. The end boss for this zone is nothing special though. Robotnik just picks the floor apart and you gotta hit him when he gets close. Done. Labyrinth Zone. Let's just be completely honest. No one likes this place. Just Labyrinth anything sucks. Who the hell wants to be reminded that the game's supposed to be challenging? You're supposed to feel that, man. Not have the game tell you, yeah, you're gonna get lost here. Not to mention... water. Hey you. You ever tried running underwater in real life? Yeah, it don't feel too good, right? Yeah, well it don't feel too good in this game either. The main gimmick of Sonic the Hedgehog is taken away from him for these next 3 stages, with the player only to rely on slow platforming to beat each level. I think the thing that makes this whole experience worse is that, ironically, everything is so time sensitive for once. Because Sonic is slower while underwater, you have to plan accordingly to new physics, and with the very real threat of drowning, you're just praying that you can just find an air bubble or dry land with some fresh air. Not even invincibility can save you from drowning, and really, I have a bone to pick with why the hell the power-up has to be so stingy with that anyways. Enemy and obstacle placement here also manages to piss me off more than usual. Here we have 3 new badniks in this zone. Orbinauts, Burrobots, and Jaws. Jawses, ain't that hard to kill. They just swim around without much offense, and if you see them,
Kill him.
they're probably the least threatening thing in this game. Burrobots can be a bit more annoying, but that's only if you don't see them peeking out from the ground in time for them to surprise you. If you're rolling or jumping, you're fine. But Orbinauts! Oh god, no. I think most sane people who have enough rings would just try to damage boost past this thing, but if you're going for all the emeralds and are trying to save enough rings for that special stage, you're forced to play its game. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't in this underwater maze where every area is so closed in, and this thing can pretty much block a choke point if he's coincidentally placed there. Which actually freaking happens! Once it throws its spike balls at you, it's left defenseless, but good luck dodging them with slow as hell water physics. Take a look at this. I have to let go of the jump button at just the right moment so I can ensure none of these hit me. And that assumes that I somehow adjusted to how Sonic moves here. This is the opposite of fun. The opposite of Sonic even. This is why Labyrinth Zone does not work. It's not even a problem exclusive to facing Orbinauts. Look at these harpoons and spiked balls and chains. They move pretty damn fast for a character to dodge who in this specific set of levels can't move to save his life. Doesn't it just seem so evil that these obstacles without water would be hard enough to dodge on their own, let alone with this garbage level layout and changed physics? Sometimes you can duck under them, but who the hell would duck in a Sonic game? Oh, and shout out to whatever the hell this thing's called. It's always put in the most inconvenient places and, well, I just don't like it. Oh, and guess what? I wasn't able to get a single Chaos Emerald in this zone. For Act 1, I was just 3 rings short of getting to a special stage. For Act 2, I actually got to the special stage, but wouldn't you know it, the last special stage is awful! This part of the playthrough was a big middle finger to me, who waited so patiently and put actual effort into not getting hit, only for me to fail on both of the chances I had for this zone. Or maybe I'm just bad. I'm just gonna leave that option on the table right over here. One of the cooler things this level does, by the way, is these water slide sections. Act 3 even has you going through like an endless loop of these things unless you can find a switch. Why does the level wrap around like that? Speaking of Act 3, the end of this zone showcases the worst of everything this game has to offer, although it kind of works in the spirit of Sonic that they might have been going for. For all of these acts in Labyrinth Zone, you're just underwater hoping to see rings or air bubbles pop up once in a while and you're fine. For the boss, if you could even call it that, you have to chase Robotnik while also dodging and avoiding obstacles as well as being fast enough to outrun the water since it won't provide any air bubbles for you this time. It's definitely a cruel test of skill if you're going into it for the first time, but think about it. You have to think fast all throughout this while going up vertically to escape the ruins. Doesn't this sound like a cool concept for like an animation? A newer game today would probably pull this sort of thing off better, but the idea of this Metroid style escape, sorry for the spoilers, it works really well I feel. Like Sonic trying to escape his own version of hell. Too bad you actually have to play it though, and even then most of the time, if you haven't done this sort of thing enough times like me, you're probably not gonna kill him. Well, not kill him, but I want to blow him up! It doesn't feel right when he just leaves and he doesn't get blown up! Anyways, a bunch of Bambinos and Penguinos escape from the capsule, and we enter Starlight Zone. Now this place is the ideal Sonic level in terms of layout design. The best balance between going fast and slow platforming without bumpers and springs throwing you around everywhere. Spring Yard Zone might be my favorite place aesthetic-wise, but Starlight Zone is such a nice experience after the nightmare that was Labyrinth Zone. This place is a highway type of area that takes place during the starry night and is about as calm as it comes in regards to playing this game. The loops are back, Sonic's allowed to run on long stretches of land or road or whatever. Everything just feels so safe and smooth, and despite being the 5th zone, it's easily one of the more easier ones. Even the music's relaxing, which isn't a concept that you'd really associate with this game's marketing of, yeah, go fast! Although here it works like a light jog in quiet but innocent streets. And speaking of music, yeah, that's something I never really touched on so far. As it goes for this game, Green Hill Zone's theme is alright, Marble Zone's is... Spring Yard Zone's is appropriate, but more so on the boring side, and Labyrinth Zone's music is... well... it's one of those tracks that adds to an experience. Except this experience isn't particularly good, and as a goofy, bouncy kind of sound, I'd rather play this on mute. Starlight Zone to me, easily the best music in the game. It doesn't scream Sonic, but whenever it plays, I associate it with a good time. Even just the little aesthetic things make this place all the better. Cones, roadblocks, streetlights, plants, I think. It's a nice place for a run. Or, well, that would be entirely the case if these bombs didn't exist and behave the way they did. They, along with Orbinauts, inhabit this whole place, but at least the latter aren't spanned around all over the place, and there's usually enough room to jump over or roll under these guys. The bombs! Yes, that's what they're called. How very original. 1. Can't be killed. 2. Are usually placed in clusters right next to one another. And 3. Explode and rain projectiles down on you. They can even be placed upside down, and you would expect that when they explode, they shoot their stuff downwards. But no, they fly out the same way as if they were right side up. That's just weird, but hey, I guess in this case right here, it kind of works for me. Another big theme that this level introduces are these seesaws with spike balls that you have to use to jump higher. They kind of bring things to a stop, but I appreciate them as a low-risk form of advancing through the level. There's also a weird mechanic with them where you can jump on them from a high altitude and be propelled even higher than you normally should, but unfortunately I wasn't able to catch it during this recording. Something I also do a bad job of showing you though, although for a good reason, is the danger that is bottomless pits, which I don't believe is in any level prior to this one, at least not to this degree. As such, you got your tricky platforming segments, which includes the seesaws we just mentioned, as well as some very unique platforms. Sure, you've got your typical moving ones, but these ones that turn into staircases are so weird. Sometimes the game even asks you to hit under them to activate them. There's no real purpose to them that a normal moving platform wouldn't serve, besides blocking certain areas. I don't know, it just kind of bothers me. Then there's these fans that work however the hell they want to, and these things that are stolen straight from Labyrinth Zone. Oh hey, we get to try the last special stage again. Now this time I do a much better job of staying towards the middle, and within a minute, the last emerald is ours. Whew! Glad that's something I never have to worry about again. Ugh. Hey, it's boss time, and Robotnik's shooting down these exploding spike balls. Luckily for us, he doesn't see these seesaws for some reason. We can use them to hurl bombs at him, or even throw ourselves at him in spitting ball form. This was actually something I found by complete accident. It's weird, yet cool how it's just another intended way to defeat the boss, considering these seesaws normally leave you in a vulnerable state, rather than ready to attack. Overall, all 3 acts in the boss of Starlight Zone were so easy, I was able to beat it all in like less than 8 minutes. Why is this so late in the game, and so easy? They even tried making it harder by removing a checkpoint in the second act, but even that failed since I was able to beat it in just over a minute. Well, much appreciated I guess, as we head into the last 3 stages of the game in... Scrap Brain, whoa! Hello, music. Ah, yeah, I love this song. Right from the get-go, you know we're getting into late game territory. And I mean, yeah, if you're playing as a hedgehog constantly getting into fights with robots and a mad scientist, there's really no doubt that a factory like setting signals the end of the game. But does it work well as a final area based off its layout? I'd say so, yeah. But they're not pulling any punches. This place is pretty much Death Central, although, as we've touched before, rings exist, so as long as you keep at least one, you'll be fine for the most part. But let's take a closer look here. It seems like this zone has acts that play somewhat differently from one another. There's no real identical theme here in terms of level mechanics, and as the final area, it's cool that I don't have to expect the same format that I've had for most of the game. Not only does it make this whole place stand out, but there's layers to how you traverse in it in order to reach the end. The first act consists of Sonic running around the outside of an industrial park, so you can kind of see how big Robotnik's empire is and how he plans to expand it should you ultimately fail. It also looks like a big city. Does anyone live here? You've got flamethrowers, electric traps, collapsible floors here. So I hope not. You've also got the return of 2 annoying enemies in the Caterpillar and the Bomb, and a new enemy called the Ball Hog, which is a cute little pig that throws a ball at you. Aww. There's also a unique mechanic here that plays into what path you decide to take in this level, where you have to go into a machine as a ball, and depending on how it rotates, it spits you out towards another area. I think stuff like this where the game takes advantage of Sonic's ability to turn into a ball is really something that the game should have focused more on. Sure, you can roll whenever you want, but putting your character in situations like these where other video game characters can't is a surefire way to make them stand out more and make a better impact. What, I think Green Hill Zone is the only other zone that does this? I'm not even talking about jumping or rolling to destroy parts of the level. I'm talking about moments that showcase how well you can animate Sonic and take advantage of his skills in order to add that into his overall movement. If only there was a way we could focus a little bit more on that. The second act is the interior of one of the factories in Scrap Brain Zone, and right away we see a cool gimmick where... Oh, I missed. We see a cool gimmick where you have to run around this circular gear looking thing and use your speed and time your jumps right in order to reach a higher platform. Now we've seen Sonic run upside down before, but here, you're encouraged to use this thing to build momentum, and you can really take off farther if you decide to roll. I don't even want to think about how gravity works here and how Sonic's shoes manage to stick onto this thing in order to run around it, but it's really neat how inventive the developers got to right away making another act in this zone stand out. This act also has teleporters all over the place. Buzzsaws, presses, conveyor belts, All very factory-like stuff, and some of it can be pretty hard to avoid. There was even a time I got worried because I was running around without any rings, and if I went too fast, I might have gotten caught by surprise by a badnik or something. But thankfully, despite all the times I've gotten hurt in this place, I can say that the Scrap Brain Zone levels are still about as long as your typical act in this game, which at this point I've averaged at somewhere between 2 to 3 minutes. You can kinda blame Marble and Labyrinth Zone for raising that average. But yeah, Scrap Brain Zone so far, not too hard, not too easy, but also not too long, and it's still introducing us to new stuff. But then there's Scrap Brain Zone Act 3. Yep, I know some of you saw this coming. Once you've beaten the second act, you're treated to a rare scripted moment in this game where— Hello, music. Again? We're treated to a rare scripted moment in this game where Robotnik hides behind a barrier and presses a switch sending you to Labyrinth Zone Act 4. Well, I guess I shouldn't really be too surprised they saved the worst for last. It's just kind of funny to me how it's just a palette swap of a previous zone design. I mean, I guess I could see this as a kind of dungeon or sewage system, I don't know. Did Robotnik build his factory on top of some ruins? Did he build this whole place himself? Well, whatever it is, I was able to beat it in just under 3 minutes. There's no real new thing added here, it's just some more Labyrinth Zone for your shovels. Hell, I'd say this place is actually easier than your typical Labyrinth Zone act. It's kinda lame as the last level though. Look, I get what they were trying to do. Oh hey, Labyrinth Zone's pretty tough. Let's bring it back and surprise the player right before the end. I guess it would have been a lot more welcome to continue on to something more dangerous, adding to this whole factory setting, instead of just recycling something that no one really wanted to see back. I will say though, the way you exit out of this place is kinda cool. Oh my gosh! Hello there again, music! That's a good marching tune you got there, Robotnik. This is it, man. No rings, no level, no badnik. Just you and the big man himself. Oh, I'm sorry if that comment actually offends you, Eggman. No hard feelings. I'm sure this is all natural and healthy. You should probably work out on those legs, though. That might not be healthy. Alright, let's kill him dead. This final boss fight is simple in explaining, but a little tough in executing. Basically, dodge all the obstacles and try to hit Robotnik whenever he appears. But since you aren't given any rings, any damage you take will instantly kill you, and of course even if you had any rings, the presses Robbie here hides in would be a one-hit kill anyways. It's not the most exciting final boss, but it certainly is worthy of the title, though that's not really saying much. It's a gauntlet fight for sure when you're forced to avoid stuff after you get a turn on hitting him or missing him if you're awful like me. And it's definitely the hardest boss fight in this game, but it's not like any other boss fight was really all that tough. Except maybe the fourth one, but you can't really call that a fight. That's just more intentionally awful level design disguised as harder difficulty. Yeah, I said it. God, okay, whatever, I gotta stop mentioning Labyrinth Zone. Look, hit him 8 more times, the place breaks down, and it seems like there's another opportunity here for Egghead here to escape, but you're allowed to hit him 1 more time and really finish him off once and for all. Or maybe, because for all we know, the guy could still land safely if it just slowly descends like that. But apparently, there's no time to check any of that! All of this scientist torturing warrants a nice celebration in the end, and as Sonic makes his way all the way back to Green Hill Zone with 6 Chaos Emeralds, he brings life back to his world once again with a big old smile on his face. That's a good ending, everybody. What happens if you don't get any of the Chaos Emeralds? Well, Sonic just kinda stares at you for a few seconds, flowers don't appear, and he still ends up mugging at the camera anyways. Yeah! That's pretty much all the emeralds do for you in this game. The risk was definitely not worth the reward in the end. It's just kinda lazy. You don't even get extra lives from the points you might get from special stages, so this literally has no bearing on anything. What's the point? Everyone still gets saved in the end! After that, the credits roll, showing highlights from every zone with a melody of all the stage themes playing in the background, which sounds kinda cool in theory, but they don't segue into each other very well, so it's more like, hey, yeah, play the next song! There's a little bit of sentimental value I get from it, though, I'm not gonna lie. Just reflecting back here on all that I've done for the past hour. Once all the names are done flashing by, we once again either get to see 1 of 2 things depending on if you got the emeralds or not. Being that I got the good ending, I was treated to Robotnik stomping on the word end, which unfortunately implies that yes, he's still alive. But if you got the bad ending, you're forced to watch Eggman juggle around all the Chaos Emeralds that you missed, and hey, planning on trying to get those last 2? Well, looks like the game restarted itself like nothing ever happened. I kinda don't like how minimal these endings are. Also, how did Eggman get those emeralds? Did he go through the special stages? I'd like to see that. Where's that game? Okay, so apparently, according to the Japanese manual, The reason why Eggman even started attacking this whole island in the first place was for the Chaos Emeralds. What was he going to do with them? I don't know, but they hold a lot of power and it's presumed that he wanted to do some evil scientist stuff with them. That kind of sounds like a big deal. You think maybe this game would somehow explain itself and say why exactly you're doing all of this? Yeah, Eggman's scattering robots everywhere and he's trying to kill you, but maybe the game should have tried explaining why in its own weird minimalist way. Show a little cutscene of what it is these Chaos Emeralds do. The effects of Robotnik's influence in a world where Sonic isn't there to save the day. There's no stakes here and the whole experience feels hollow for a game that puts so much effort into colorfully building its worlds. And don't get me wrong, a lot of early platformers did this sort of thing. Whether it be due to like technical limitations, we couldn't have a cutscene with Bowser in the first Mario game. But I'm just saying, this is 1991. I feel like they could have done something, right? Genesis does what Nintendo don't? Is it still fun? Yeah, but I think if they really wanted to add more to Sonic's character and world and give us more of a reason to care, they could have added a short cutscene or even just a wall of text explaining the story if you decided to wait at the title screen. But hey, what better excuse can be given than it's the first Sonic game? We can only hope that they'll get better over time should they decide to do more. The impact led by the first Sonic the Hedgehog game is something special that you never see too often. Everyone who played it loved it upon release, and it was revolutionary in establishing that certain video game conventions didn't have to be so conventional anymore. You can go fast, but if you can't control it and don't know what you're doing, you're your own biggest hurdle. Sonic did something that most couldn't at a time where Mario was on top. He proved that Nintendo wasn't invincible, and that they weren't the only ones with the promising concept of a console, and more importantly, was able to do so in the States. The original Sonic the Hedgehog game was a major success, although far from perfect. Marketed as the faster and more attitude-filled alternative to the Plumber Boy, consumers in the West bought into Japan's bait. They developed a game that they thought Americans would love, and wouldn't you know it, Americans loved it. Of course, the game still holds some traditional gaming conventions and ideas that keep it from being its own supremely unique experience, but in what it did right, it was able to not only sell people on a new character to play as, but most importantly, a new way to play entirely. The marketing may have ignored stuff like the annoying underwater stage and the occasional waiting segments, but back then, that's what platformers were, and if you played the game enough times, maybe you could get through stuff like that a little faster the next time if you tried playing. Sounds ridiculous and somewhat facetious, but that's kind of the way this game was intended to be played. The reward of this game is to see Sonic going fast. Sometimes you get stopped because you might not know when something's coming, while other times you have to wait properly to reach a place where you can eventually run more or reach secrets. That's Sonic 1 in a nutshell. And can you believe that at one point Sonic was made to go even faster? Though testers deemed the game unplayable, so they slowed him down. There's a great level of consideration in that, because despite the appeal for this game being that the character should go fast, at the end of the day, it still has to play like a game. And does it play like a game? Yeah, a pretty damn solid one, though if you remove Sonic's momentum, it'd be seen as a lot more stock and would highlight more of its problems, not unlike a certain stage does. It's definitely not bad, however, and you can see it through the reviews of the time. 8 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s, this thing was a must-buy back then. It even inspired an 8-bit version to be made later that year for the Sega Master System and Game Gear. Although, it's somewhat watered down and missing some of the momentum-based physics of the original, like running faster when going downhill. That just feels unnatural, man! Other than that, the game shares some of the same mechanics from the original, albeit with its own perks and even some new zones. But regardless of its differences, even the 8-bit version of Sonic 1 would sell well, and it spelled success for a then new IP. Toys, comics, cartoons, tie-ins, it was like Bartmania 2.0. You couldn't avoid him. And it's because of this that Sega would not just be a lesser-known company anymore. No longer was Nintendo the end-all be-all for gaming as it had been for nearly 6 years up until that point. The gaming culture of the West had changed a lot since 1985. Genesis was for a new generation, whereas Super Nintendo was made to try and reach former glory. You only had to look at which one of these consoles had enough power to run a game so great. Or at least, that's what some people would have you think during the summer of 1991. Because pretty soon, Nintendo would have the chance to retaliate against their first worthy competitor in a great war that would span nearly the entirety of the 90s.